Welcome! My name's Sarah Fletcher and I'm pleased to introduce to you the second virtual art exhibition that Emma Morrissey and I have created together during this rather strange time of 2020. We went through quite a different process with this one to what we did with Comfort Creations back in April, so we wanted to tell you a little bit about that. With this exhibition we knew there were certain themes we wanted to include, and we also knew that we wanted to use our writing in some way because that's another creative process that we both really enjoy. So we decided as a starting point to write a folding story together, or at least a variation on one. So if you've played a folding story game before, then you know they can turn out quite silly. You don't know what the previous writer has written, so it can be quite a funny exercise. We did ours a little bit more structured than that, so we sometimes let each other see the parts that we'd written and we knew kind of the topics we were writing on. So we were really just aiming for quite a descriptive piece that we could then perhaps pull out some poems from or focus on certain scenes to create our work from. But in the end, when we read it back, we found that we really liked our story, and it was a very nice descriptive kind of piece already. So we decided that we would illustrate this story as it is, and we would create a kind of storybook exhibition. So that's what we've done, and we'll read it to you in a bit. But first, we're just both going to talk a little bit about how using that process has been different and changed how we go about the art itself.
The process of creating the artworks for this exhibition has been something I've found really enjoyable. The previous one that myself and Sarah did was Comfort Creations, and I found that process completely different. This one for Teacups and Buttercups is a lot more of a natural process. I found myself creating pieces more sort of directly from my imagination, really, with very little reference ideas, just really from the sentences that we'd both written in our folding story. And I absolutely loved that because it sort of gave us the opportunity to both use our love of writing and poetry and storytelling to create this folding story, and then looking at the detailed aspects of that, and then taking the sort of really descriptive words and sentences from our story and then turning those into individual artworks. And that was, as I said, a really sort of organic process for me, because I found myself working in a completely different way to the way I traditionally would.
So, as Emma said, these were images that came out of our imagination as writers. And so we were working with images that were maybe from memory or that we'd made up completely as we wrote the story. For me, that was quite a tricky aspect of this exhibition. It was both a nice thing and a difficult thing. I'm a person who absolutely cannot draw from my head. I can certainly picture things in my head. I can very vividly imagine things when I'm trying to write something and describe it. But if I try and hold that picture there to look at as I try and draw it, it just sort of wiggles around and disappears. And won't stay still for me. So in order to create these illustrations of the things we'd described in the story, I had to go away and spend a really large amount of time finding a collection of reference images that I could then put together to create any one image from the story, and then try and work out the perspective, how those different parts would fit together in the finished picture. So there was quite tricky stuff in terms of perspective for me here. It was a really good exercise in that. Also in using white space, getting those contrasts. And I came up with a few new kind of process things where I was quite often putting the ink parts, the dark black parts, down on the page before the colour, so that I knew where the really deep shadows were, and then I wouldn't go and put too many other dark shadows on the page, and I would leave that white space. But this was also really lovely because it was essentially things that we really wanted to make artwork about, things that delight us, things that we find connect us to others, that inspire us with our imagination, that bring back memories and that kind of thing. So we were talking really a lot about recollection, connection and imagination. So all the shuns in this.
Traditionally, I'm more of a portrait artist, specializing in realism art. And a lot of the artwork you'll see in our exhibition here is very much from a illustrative perspective. A lot of the colors I've used have been very bright, and I've created them in a mixture of watercolor and ink, and really just I wanted to create a sense of a dream state, really, and create these images of what that combination of nature, culture, food, drink, the colors of nature, the sounds of nature, just to really create something that has a really nice feel to it, really. And I really enjoyed being part of that process. One of the other things that I noticed was quite different for me for this second exhibition that me and Sarah had done is I was working much smaller in terms of the actual physical sizes of the artworks. I was working mainly in a very, very small A6 watercolor pad, and I usually work much larger. So the benefits of working to a smaller scale, I was able to focus on the detail of some areas more than others, have some areas a little bit looser, a little bit freer, and it gave me the opportunity to do more artworks in one go because they were smaller. So I found if I had that kind of creative spark, then I was able to move from one piece of work to another. And I think they all have similarities, particularly in terms of the colour palette that's in them. They are all very bright and quite bold, which I like. And again, that's quite different to my usual artwork. So it's been a lovely process, and it's amazing to be able to work together in a creative way like this again.
I was sitting under the old oak tree, in a little pool of dappled shade, my afternoon tea on a tray by my side, and my legs stretched out in front of me. I watched some tiny white daisies shifting in the wind, reflecting in the surface of the tea in my cup. They reminded me of the tutus of some kind of tiny dancers, fairies perhaps. As I watched, a bumblebee flew down close to the tea tray and hovered there. As I lifted the tea to drink, the bumblebee flew past me, not a care, thankfully, minding its own business. I watched as it flew up into the old oak tree, then looked down into my cup, where reflections of the leaves above danced.
The reflection of the tree as it swayed in the breeze reminded me of breathing, soft, subtle, yet always constant, a gentle reminder of life and purpose, of possibility and choice. I thought about the choices that I have, and those that I've made in the past, and of the possibilities I could create in my imagination. What if the bees laughed with the leaves, buzzing and flying around? What if a whole miniature world lived up there among the leaves, that I could only glimpse in pensive moments like this one? It made me feel small in a good way.
I looked back down at the tray beside me. On a little plate, dainty and matching my cup and saucer, was lavender shortbread,
Eating these always brought back memories of childhood at the park, as a child making these with my mother. I would mix in lavender and cut out the biscuits into shapes of butterflies.
Butterflies? How odd I should think of them, just as one flew by, bright and fleeting against the sunlit backdrop of my garden. It was hot now, the sun making the daisies droop. I should fill up the bird bath and water my herb collection, happy in their odd pots. An assortment of recycled household objects held and surrounded the herbs. A leaky watering can, a chipped mug, a teapot, an old sundial, its shadow casting dancing shapes over the daisies.
The watering can stood proudly, gathering rust around the handle, erasing its prior mint green paint. The scent from the flowers was truly beautiful. It brought back memories of picnicking in the botanical gardens with friends and family. The scent of the wisteria growing over the walkway there had been intoxicating. We would take tea, homemade gingerbread, a spread of savoury snacks like olives and cheese, and sit in the shade, sometimes with musical instruments.
Nearby was the lotus pond, with its fascinating seed pods and beautiful blooms. It always seemed to me as though there must be elves or fairies near that pond somewhere, hidden just out of sight. When our picnic was finished, we would read poetry, writing down in small journals everything unfolding before our eyes. The falling leaves, the scent of flowers,
the breeze ringing the small wind chimes. This always brought back memories of all the other occasions when we had sat here, or in other gardens, the changes of season, changing the colours and what we wore, but never disrupting the sense of calm and connection with nature, with each other, and with time, with those who had come here before us, with the times we would spend this way in the future.
I would often think about other gardens and outdoor gathering places around the world where the climate and things that grew might be so unlike the ones here. And yet, perhaps, like us, people sat among the plants and watched nature living. It connected us all, that reminder that we belonged to the earth and that these were our places. Maybe there was afternoon tea in the garden there too, picnics in the sun. I often tried to imagine how the food might be different, to see the colours and textures of different plates and clothing, although I could never imagine the scene without tea, which it might well be. But then, beverages too connected us, the way they were shared, imparting trust, community, culture. Could it be coffee in the cup or something else?
Perhaps turmeric tea overlooking the sunset in India, or that trusty flask of mine clutched in my right hand as I jogged to work, ensuring I don't fatigue for the aroma of coffee is nearby. Picnics of all kinds being enjoyed, created and photographed to be printed and stuck into journals of crafters, the pages filled with images of the childhood teddy bear picnics with plastic teacups, to the mini burgers and tiny hot dogs of a summertime tea party, feeling the sun on our shoulders as we made daisy chains in the grass, camp mugs by an autumn bonfire, an old copper kettle on the coals.
As I reflected on these colours, the afternoon drew into evening, a honey amber light brushing the garden with a new glow. The daisies began to close their petals for the night, and the sun drew low in the sky, like a single coal from the campfire image lingering in my mind's eye. Across the clouds, a seeping of red warmth spread to match the rose petals. My teapot empty, and my shortbread all gone, I stacked my saucer with the dainty plate and cup,
pinched a few flowers from their stems to cheer the table inside, and carried the tray back to the kitchen, my lungs still full of the sweet-scented garden afternoon. Somewhere, someone was doing this all in reverse, steam rising from their cup as they set out to greet the chill of the morning.